Jones messed with the wrong melon farmers.
Ted Jones, I also call him the eighth wonder of the real estate world.
Ted Jones, who knows, it could be.
Ted Jones?
The Ted Jones World Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the 40th episode of the Ted Jones World Podcast. Pat, that's 40. That's a lot of episodes, bro. How are you feeling, man?
Great. How are you feeling?
Great. I'm feeling good. Bruno Ricciotti from Bond Realty NYC. Bruno, how are you, man?
Good.
Okay, so Bruno is actually a tip-top broker in New York City, and I just wanted to get him on, especially during times like this. People are freaking out about renting apartments in New York City. People want to know how to do it, what they should be looking for. So, Bruno, why don't you just give us a quick little bio on yourself and how you started this massive company with, 400, 500 real estate brokers? Go ahead, dude.
Well, all right. I was an agent for a couple of years from 97 to 2000, just fresh out of college. And after a couple of years, I got a little bit burned out on that and decided to go off on my own and open Bond with a good friend of mine that I went to elementary school and high school with. And we kind of just opened up a little shop just for it was actually three of us back then. And we started training people and hiring people, getting more listings and whatnot. And it just kind of snowballed into what it is today. We actually turned 20 May 7th. So we hit our 20th anniversary. And it's been a wild ride. We're definitely in one of the wilder chapters right now and kind of continuing to figure it out as we go along.
Yeah. So, I mean, you talk about, trying to figure out as you go along a case-by-case situation, which everyone with a job right now or everyone not with a job right now is kind of just figuring it out day by day. So what's it like renting apartments right now in the New York City atmosphere?
Well, it's tricky. I mean, we're very restricted. We're not, allowed to show apartments. Everything needs to be done virtually, which, is kind of a loose term for video presentations. I'm doing a lot of 3D presentations now. There's a lot of really cool ways that you can kind of walk and meander your way through apartments without actually physically going to the apartments. So that's been helpful, but it's tricky. It's difficult. A lot of people got out of town when, the news of the virus hit and aren't ready to come back until things have cleared up. So you have a lot of vacant apartments, which, typically would have been pre-rented while they were occupied, which of course can't happen right now, that have hit the market and become vacant. You have owners who are eager to get them rented, but you have people who have, moved out to their vacation homes or their parents' homes or wherever, and they're, waiting for, to come back, which could be a month or two away, which makes it very difficult to kind of line up those move-in dates and stuff. So it's tricky. We're getting them.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to rush. Yeah, we're getting them through, but it's not at all like the typical pace of a New York City summer rental market.
Would you say on bondnyc.com and Street Easy, and I'm sure you use other avenues to rent apartments and such, but are you seeing less clicks than you were last June? Compared to June 2019, like somebody fresh out of college, graduating, looking to move to the East Village or wherever?
There's less clicks, but the clicks don't really represent the actual, transaction activity. It's just a lot of people circling around, looking at, perusing the inventory and waiting for the right moment. I think it's going to be a real frenzy when the shelter in place is lifted, which looks like it's going to be this month. I can see in a couple of weeks there's going to be a pent-up demand with tons of people who've been sitting on the sidelines, like I said, circling, clicking, doing virtual tours, talking to our agents, etc., who will actually be back in town physically and able to look at apartments again. And I think, there's going to be a short period of time with a lot of good deals, and they'll evaporate pretty quickly once that happens.
I mean, especially during times like now where everything is really up in the air. There's a lot of activity going on in the city, protests and such, and of course looting and rioting. But I feel like we're seeing that more so in the looting part, more so in areas like Soho or like a Fifth Avenue, maybe, where they have like higher, I don't know, like higher brand like tenants. Now I know Pat lives in Soho. He's actually currently renting month to month. He signed a month to month lease. And when did you sign it, Pat? May?
End of March. Yeah, end of March.
So Pat is like right in the heart of Soho, near Balenciaga, Montclair. I've seen videos of them being broken into. What would you say is like the safest area for somebody who's moving to New York City from the middle of the country to go to, especially if you don't need to afford a place and you don't have the budget for a doorman?
Oh boy, I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that question. When you say safe,
definitely, you don't want to throw any listings under the bus.
I don't have the police statistics. I mean, when you say safe, you mean in terms of along a longer general timeline, or within the context?
You know what?
The
only way I was saying within like the confines of what's going on right now, but I'd say just like in general, I'd say that for the most part, the higher rents are associated with the areas that people feel more safe, like a West Village, or where Pat lives, like a Soho. I guess you'd feel more safe. But
most of Manhattan is pretty safe in 2020 now.
I'm gonna follow Pat with a safe answer there and say, in my experience, as someone that grew up in Philadelphia, right? It's a smaller city, not quite as dense, not as populous. I've felt like, after I moved to New York, people would tell me like, oh, be careful up there, before I moved here. And when I got here, I feel like it's the safest place I've ever been.
Yeah,
and
me too.
I actually feel a little bit out of touch with like safety concerns around the country. And, because, like the gun debate, for example, like there's no reason to have a gun in New York. There's so many people, there's so many police officers. It feels really safe. But of course, if you live in a much more spread out rural environment, those things, protecting yourself is a little bit different. So, in that very grand general sense, I feel like it's the safest place in the country simply because it's so dense.
So people shouldn't be worried about moving to New York City from the middle of the suburbs, middle of America. People are just hesitant for the wrong reasons, I suppose. I mean, I've heard maybe not a huge wave of people being or feeling unsafe in New York City, but I think that for the most part, some people are wanting to get out, and people are maybe not going to want to come. Do you think that this is going to be change for New York and how people look for apartments?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm optimistic, I guess, by nature. I guess I'll reference two things. First of all, there's protests and riots in every city. So it's not unique to me. It's not like this is the only place to, worry about, getting caught up in a riot or something like that. I mean, that's happening everywhere. And, I don't think it's going to go on forever. As far as the virus, where it is very, very unique to New York. And I understand why people are, in other states where the death toll is much lower, are frustrated by the shelter in place and whatnot. It's too early to determine, but the sense that I get is that, our curve is, I think our curve is happening fast. I think we're getting through it faster. And I could be completely off base on this, but I kind of get the feeling that, whether it's the herd immunity concept and whatnot, I think that New York is probably going to return to normal more quickly. I think that density of the population that's created this, contagiousness for it to spread so fast and pass through the population faster might actually make it end faster here. Because what it looks like, if you look at the daily death numbers, which I'm constantly watching, they're lower than a lot of the other neighboring states, and some of the, the states further down south are kind of still on the rise. So there's a little bit of a seesawing going on. It could be one of the safer places with respect to the virus before we know it. It's too early to tell.
Yeah, who knows, man? I think everyone will feel much better once there's a vaccine and they can leave their apartment, or even before that, phase 1.5, phase 2. But let's keep it moving, New York City. So now that a bunch of people are in quarantine, stuck in their apartments, I'm sure people are wishing that they upgraded to that 1 bedroom from the studio. They had the extra $250 a month to spend, but they didn't. I'm sure people are wishing that they chose different neighborhoods where they had a little bit extra outdoor space, higher ceilings. What do you think is going to be the pent-up demand through this whole coronavirus situation, where people are going to probably have been in their apartments for 5 months? What do you think people are going to really fully start to think about in moving into a building?
Well, I mean, what I'm seeing right now are people who are tired of their roommates. I'm seeing a lot of that. That's certainly a motivating force for a lot of people to find apartments. I'm not sure if I'm addressing the question as specifically as you like, but there are a lot of I call them share apartments, 3, 4, and 5 bedrooms with equal sized rooms and whatnot like that.
Wow.
That are sitting vacant, and with the exodus of students due to classes being canceled,
Wait, Bruno, excuse me, sorry, 5 bedrooms? Like 5 bedrooms in a, how what's the square footage of that apartment?
It depends. I mean, there's some small 5 bedrooms, there's some big 5 bedrooms. Yeah, it really depends.
It's New York.
You
Sorry,
can put
go
a lot
ahead.
of walls
Continue.
in an apartment, I've learned. Yeah, for sure. But, those are the kinds of apartments that are more difficult to rent now, because, there's the students aren't around. So there's going to be some bargains with those kinds of apartments. But I'm finding, and, I'm not in the trenches as much as, the agents who are actually fielding the inquiries directly right now. But the feedback that I get is the action is really like a studio and 1 bedroom with a handful of 2 bedroom on the rental side, where the activity is. All the, the larger apartments are more difficult. There's just less demand for them right now.
So let's say, I keep referring to the person graduating from college in the middle of the country, because I know you're listening. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Ted Jones World, episode 40 here on, what is it, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube? But we got Bruno from Bond NYC here, and, he's telling us a little bit about renting an apartment. So, Bruno, if let's say, I'm coming from Nebraska. Pat, Nebraska is in the middle of the country enough for you, right?
Sure, yeah.
Sure. Or I'll say Kansas. All right. So I'm coming from Kansas. I'm going to be looking to find an apartment. I'm making $80,000 my first year. I got a great job, obviously. Yeah. So Bruno, what can I get with my $80,000 a year? Like what if I come to you and I say, I'm making $80,000, I want to live alone, I don't want any roommates, I heard about this quarantine situation, I'm not dealing with it with anyone. So what do I need to be making? What does my credit score need to look like? Can my parents help me out a little bit?
Yeah, you can get a glorious $2,000 New York City apartment for an $80,000 yearly income. The typical rule, and there's some fluctuation to that, but it's 40 times the monthly rent per year. An interesting conversation about qualifying for an apartment, especially for students and out-of-state folks, is that the local legislature here passed bunch of laws last year to theoretically to help make getting an apartment easier. And one of those restrictions was a cap on the amount of security that a landlord can ask someone for. And paradoxically, it has made getting apartments much more difficult because anyone who has a guarantor from far away, or income that is short, or credit that is on the border or not established, folks without any U.S. credit, that don't live here or whatever, they don't have that remedy to, mitigate the risk for a landlord to accept them that they did in the past. So to answer your question, yes, you can use a guarantor. It's actually much more necessary. Guarantors need to be stronger. They tend to be preferred to be from New York or closer to New York. And credit, typically the number is like, everyone wants to see a 7, a 700 credit and up. But I find that nowadays landlords are more particular because they can't secure themselves with, any extra security. They really have to pick the best, most qualified, financially qualified tenants. So, yeah, all those things, but it's more difficult than it's ever been.
So do you think that now that, it's becoming more difficult to rent an apartment and people kind of don't want to be stuck in a small area in a studio apartment, do you think that people are going to be looking towards buying something that they know that they won't be kicked out by a landlord, or are people gonna continue to rent? What do you think?
Hey, it's a individual decision. Everyone's in a different place. I mean, buying always works out in the long run in New York. Property values just go up. There's dips, but if you're long term and you have the liquidity for a down payment, I mean, interest rates are great right now, and both the rental market and the the purchasing market are, for the moment, down 5 to 15%, depending on what price point and where. So, there's whichever situation, suits that individual, it's a good time for both right now. It's a better time for either, in the last couple of years.
But you're talking about, property values going up in New York City year by year, and I agree with you. But what do you think about buying a studio compared to, buying a one bedroom somewhere where you actually can be, establish yourself more? Maybe a dog or girlfriend moves in and you're able to have space. And a studio, I feel like studios in New York City haven't really gone up in value in the last 10 to 15 years. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Just the space itself is so small.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to correct you on that one. I mean, everything goes up. I mean, I can tell you that when I started in the business, a friend of mine bought an alcove studio on 12th Street for $175,000, and it's probably worth $800,000 now. I mean, it's been.
But Bruno, I feel like that an alcove studio is a bigger version of a studio, and that's the best location in New York City. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're right. But it really doesn't matter where. I mean, Brooklyn has been the hottest,
right.
It's been the hottest area, sections of Brooklyn and like Western Queens the last couple of years. I mean, we were selling units, 5-6 years ago for 300,000. We're selling for $1.2 million now. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Where do you think the new wave is? Where are people going to be moving to, starting 2021, or where should be people moving into right now to get a good deal?
It's funny. We've been having this conversation a lot, and people are saying, oh, people are going to leave the city, or and I kind of feel like some people might leave the city, and I think the city it's a little more desirable if it's not, the lines are a little less long, the traffic's a little a little less intense. I could see it becoming, more of a draw again. I don't know. I mean, at the moment, everything's temporary. Really, that's what's so difficult about this virus.
It's hard to understand. It's very hard to comprehend.
Right. It's booming at the moment in the Hamptons, short-term rentals, people getting out of the city for a few months, waiting out to see how long it's going to last. Jersey City is busy. Connecticut is busy. Anywhere where you can spread out a little bit and get away from the epicenter of the virus is busy.
So you mentioning those other places. So do you, in your brokerage company, do you have a team that you assign for each specific area? Do you know what I mean?
So the way we work, we're a pretty big company. About half of our agents are sales agents and half are rental agents. And, it's just specific to rentals, we have certain agents that specialize in certain areas, certain price points. Some specialize in representing landlords. Some are tenant reps, and they're all really, they're different. They're different trades. And some agents, the more experience that they have, and the more customers that they field and deal with, they develop the skills to do some of them do all of that stuff. So, I know agents that do deals all over the city. They'll rent a $40,000 a month apartment, and they'll rent, an $1,800 apartment in the same month. So, yeah.
That's cool. I mean, you got to have variety if you're going to be a top dog. Do you have like a specific group of people that, bring in the most volume? I mean, I'm sure you do, but do you have like a go-to broker that, let's say, Bill Gates comes to the city and he's like, all right, Bruno, I need to rent an apartment, dude. I know you're out in Palm Beach.
You heard about this deal?
Sun. I know you're in Palm Beach in the sun. I know, dude. I didn't want to blow you up, but we had to tell this story. Bill Gates comes to the city, hit up Bruno. Bruno's in Palm Beach. Billy's like, all right, whatever, dude. I need to rent an apartment. Just give me your best agent. Do you have someone that you can really rely on to go to any apartment and, regardless of the rent number and location?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's a mental algorithm. You know what I mean? You look for commonalities. You look for personality matches. You want people to like each other and want to work together. So, if I'm making the referral, if Bill Gates is coming to me and asking me who I want to pair him up with to help him find an apartment, I'm going to kind of like, I know a lot of my agents really well, and I just kind of want to think about who's going to be the right fit in terms of, getting along and spending time with each other. Because sometimes it lasts a while to find the right apartment.
And what would you recommend if somebody was deciding between high ceilings in a good location or outdoor space in a lesser desirable location?
What's the question again?
I'm just, okay. So like let's say you have like a little Juliet balcony here, you're trying to rent something in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Very trendy, by the way, for those who don't know. So you have the decision to make between a block from the L train with higher ceilings or 4 blocks from the L train with a little bit of outdoor space. What's something that people should really, I'm thinking as a renter, and I would like to pick your brain about what is something that a renter doesn't really always think about, like something that would go unnoticed.
Okay, all right. I actually have a good answer for that. Because all those things are important. Like high ceilings and outdoor space are 2 of my personal favorites. Some people don't care, or some people don't notice. But to answer the question, what do people not notice that really matters, that maybe they don't know matters?
Yeah. Besides closet space, that's definitely
people know the closet space matters. But I'll tell you what I think it is. I think it's going to sound funny, but allocation of space along the surface area of the building is what people respond to without realizing it. And
wait, what? What do you mean?
Yeah, so let me explain that. So, you know, we do a lot of new development representation. We do a lot of consulting. Like, so, you know, a landlord has a couple of buildings, they knock them down and they build a high rise, and we, you know, we help them build the building. Essentially, we decide the unit mix, we do all the layouts to maximize the value of that space, right? So what people respond to is, the short answer is, it's light. People psychologically respond to light. Light's actually more important than space. People don't realize it. They'll look at an ad, they'll see $1 per square foot that looks like a good value, and they'll get to the apartment and it's some converted warehouse where the apartment is, you know, 1,500 square feet, but it's a bowling alley that's 90 feet long with one window at the end, and 80% of the apartment is kind of dark. So if you have that same apartment laid out along the surface area of the building, and you've got 100 feet of windows, and it's the same amount of space, but the entire space is lit up because it is short and wide and along the surface area where the windows are, people walk in and they go, I love it, I'll take it. And they don't even know why. Oftentimes they don't know why.
Wow.
So it's one of the secrets, you know, I can actually, you know, I'll look at floor plans and be like, this is gonna fly because of how it's laid out, and, you know, how much of the space is illuminated because it's near the windows.
Interesting. Thank you for letting us in on that tip, Pat. I mean, now you have some insight after you decide to move out of the apartment that you're in right now. It's funny, the apartment, no offense, Pat, but the apartment that you were just describing is vaguely like Pat's apartment. Very long.
Sorry, Pat.
Like a bowling alley. Whatever. You'll help him out, rent an apartment. Pat, do you have any questions here for Bruno before we sign off? Bruno, thank you so much, man.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it.
The only thing I would know is I know people, other renters that I know, people are renting in New York City, want to know what the future of broker fees is looking like and what that whole legislation is.
Right. Well, do I have time to answer?
Yeah. We got a few more minutes. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, well, the local legislation is trying to modify that, and there was a court date in June. I think it was March, got pushed to June. June got pushed to September. I'm being told it's going to probably take a couple of years to sort of argue that out. And really what that is they want to separate landlord rep and tenant rep in a way where if you rep a landlord, you get paid by the landlord. You rep a tenant, you get paid by the tenant. You know, in sales, for example, the sellers pay both brokers, the buyer rep and the seller rep. So it's common in sales. I don't know what they're really trying to accomplish necessarily. What people I think don't understand, and I guess what the interesting comment would be about this is that there are roles that need to be done for this process to happen. Somebody has to check the apartment, make sure that it's prepped, make sure that it's cleaned, painted, have it photographed, make a floor plan, do a virtual tour if you need to do a virtual tour.
Yeah, go the extra mile, bro. You're going the extra mile. Sorry, go ahead.
Write a description. That may be the extra mile, but most of this stuff is necessary. Right. Write a description, post it, have it syndicated so that it's all over the web, that it can pull in inquiries. And then, I mean, one of the things even a lot of the landlords don't understand is, you know, you put one listing out, you might get 50 inquiries in a month. You know, one person is going to rent the apartment eventually. And it's it's hours and hours of discussions and, you know, finding out if it's the right match based on what the people's qualifications are, what their interests are, you know, it's a matchmaking game. And most people just, you know, they show up, they see the apartment that they like, they do a deal, and then there's this commission that they have to pay, and they don't see it's like they don't see all the training that a boxer does his whole life. You know, they just see that he knocks somebody out in 90 seconds and gets paid a couple $1 million. They had to, you know, train his whole life. So there's a lot that's like off camera that gets done. Those things need to be done. You know, if they strip that away, the landlords are going to have to hire someone to do it in-house. And it'll have to get those, you know, they'll have to pay for it. It'll be built into the rent. and it'll up the rents. In the end, it's kind of the same thing. You know, it's whether you're paying it as a commission to a broker or in a higher rent that's amortized over a 12-month pay period. It's the same thing in the end. Somebody's got to do that work in order to get those units rented. So,
Bruno, thank you so much for joining us. Episode 40, Ted Jones World Podcast. Bruno,
Thanks,
shout
guys.
out your IG, bro. Shout out your Instagram.
You're gonna laugh, but I don't use
No,
it.
the Bond Instagram.
Oh, the Bond Instagram. I'm not even sure. I have to ask my marketing department.
BondNYC.com. Get your apartment now, Bruno. Later, bro. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. All right.
Peace.
Take care.
Later, man.